I'm the Philosophical Bachelor, and today I want to talk about the metaphysics of time. Heather Dyke provides a primer on the metaphysics of time in her 2021 book, simply entitled Time, published under Cambridge Elements. Time is one of those things we think we understand until we actually try to figure out what it in fact is, according to Augustine of Hippo. In 1908, Ian McTaggart published an influential article that laid out two competing theories, the A and B theory of time, which is primarily what Dyke will focus on. She will also briefly discuss presentism as part of A theory, which is incidentally what Augustine subscribes to. The A theory is a reflection of the folk theory of time. Folk theories are based on the common intuitions held by people regarding a subject. Two key notions people commonly have about time are: 1. The present is a privileged moment, experienced as actual compared to the past, which is already over, and the future, which is yet to come. The now is considered to be objective, the same present time which is shared by everyone, unlike the here, which is where you are, but not anyone else who have their own different here. 2. Time flows, that there is a temporal passage between the future, which becomes the present, which then becomes the past. This common sense is reflected in language, with tenses denoting the sense of what is past, present, and future, such as was, is, and will be. Words such as the flow or march of time, and metaphors which denote the movement and continuity of time, like how time is a river, how it flies, runs away, or runs out. The A theory is cashed out in several ways, one being the spotlight theory, where the present is what is illuminated with a spotlight, while the past and future are shrouded in obscurity. Another is the growing block theory, where as time passes, the block which contains what has passed is growing in the direction of the future. In this theory, the future does not exist. What exists are only the past, which forms the body of the block, and the present, which is the slice currently forming, which will then recede into the past to join the rest of the block. The A theory faces two problems. 1. It does not quite agree with the scientific account of time, which does not privilege the present. 2. It has internal contradictions. If there is temporal passage, then the rate at which this passage passes will itself need to have a metric for this flow to be measured. Time is already the metric for which events and change happens, but it seems to require itself also a metric, and a metric, which then leads to an infinite regress. As for the privileged present, each event has the conflicting characteristic of past when it is over, present while it is happening, and future when it has yet to happen but will when it becomes present. These separate moments are yet all belonging to the same event or object. How could it be unless there is temporal passage? But temporal passage itself faces logical problems beyond its infinite regress, which is better understood after the B theory is explained. The A theory speaks to our subjective experience of time. What metaphysics tries to provide is an objective account of nature, how things really are. Should a theory posit that how things really are differ from our subjective experience, then it needs to explain why that is the case. Metaphysics also needs to take into account the findings of science. For instance, we experience a table as a large rigid object which can bear the weight of other objects such as plates or books. Physics, however, tells us that this table in fact is a collection of molecules arranged in a structure that is made up mostly of empty space. Hence, if we accept the scientific account of matter as true, what we experience and what is actually the case, or reality, may differ. We somehow need to reconcile our phenomenal experience with the scientific account of reality. Past debunked and present accepted scientific theories do not tell us that the present is privileged or that time is passing. From Aristotle to Isaac Newton to Albert Einstein, physical theory does not differentiate when the phenomenon examined happens, whether it is in the past, present, or future. The equations have a term for time, typically t, but this term does not differentiate if the time is now or otherwise. It does, however, tell us whether the event under study happened before or after, meaning that we can use them to predict what will happen later or calculate how long before a cause had occurred relative to its effect. Whether the cause or its effect happens in the now or at any other time makes no difference. In addition, Einstein's special relativity tells us that the simultaneity of events is relative to the observer's reference frame. Putting these aside, our present perceptual experience of what seems to be happening now may be from some time ago, such as the light from a star. In the case of the sun, it is 8 minutes ago. In the case of Alpha Centauri, the closest star to us other than the sun, it is 4.37 years ago. We only see it now because light, fast as it is, takes time to travel. The analysis that science makes also does not tell us that there is a passage of time. Dike does not mention Henri Bergson, but Bergson critiques the scientific description of time to be spatial and static, chopping its analysis into static frames like a movie reel instead of continuously flowing. In analyzing the trajectory of a projectile using Newtonian mechanics, we can know at each moment where the projectile is, but the equations fail to capture the continuity of the motion. This is why Zeno's paradox can succeed. In each frame, each t under analysis, say t equals to 1, 2, to n, the projectile is static. How can it then ever get to its destination if it is not moving at every time? And yet it does. Bergson's solution to Zeno's paradox is that the scientific theories and their equations fail to capture the flow of time. The breaking down of the projectile's movement conceptually into instantaneous static frames, and then connecting up these frames, miss the essence of its movement, which is its dynamism, the movement in itself. When we move our arm, it is not from rest to point 1 to point 2 and so on finally to its endpoint. It is a complete unified movement. In any case, science does not feature the privileged present or temporal passage, which is where the B theory of time comes in. The B theory posits that events are ordered simply by their relations. Lunch happens after breakfast and before dinner. What time is it now is not pertinent. A ripe red apple turns rotten brown in a week. Whether this week was a year ago or 2 years in the future, the relation between the red apple and the brown one still holds. The B theory is thus tenseless, with no privileging of the present as the locus around which events are then ordered as past, present, or future. The way B theory can be cashed out is through imagining space-time as a block, when every moment in the universe is one slice of that block. The block is complete and unchanging, with all events across space and time contained in it. To speak of past, present, or future then becomes meaningless, since all that there is are instances of time. All time are equally real. The B theory does capture change, but not temporal passage. The red apple goes through stages to be brown, which can be seen in the corresponding slices of the block, but flow itself is not something that is observable. Dike believes that B theory better aligns with the scientific conception of time, since both are tenseless with no privileging of the present and no temporal passage. Yet, B theories face 3 difficulties. Firstly, what does the acceptance of the B theory mean for free will? If future events are already fixed, then any choice we have seems illusory. One way B theories can resolve this difficulty is simply to deny that there is free will. A more interesting way is to deny that just because all times exist as the B theory has it, that the future is therefore fixed. Dike explains. The B theory is committed to logical determinism, the doctrine that future tense statements have a determinate truth value. But this should not be confused with the much stronger doctrine, physical determinism, according to which, given the present total state of the universe and the laws of nature, only one future is possible. The B theory is not committed to physical determinism. It is compatible with both physical determinism and indeterminism. The reality of future times does not determine whether what happens at those times is causally determined. While A theories, such as the growing block theory, posit that the future does not yet exist, B theory posits that all times, be it past, present, or future, all exist. We can visualize what that means by imagining a block universe, but that image can be misleading. Every event, be they past, present, or future, exists tenselessly, but that does not mean they are all simultaneously present. Just because the events of the future are real, do not mean that they determine my present choice. That will be getting cause and effect backwards, where the effect effects the cause. In addition, effect does follow from cause, but that does not entail that agential free will cannot be the cause. Instead, my choice is the cause of its consequent effect that takes place in the future. The second difficulty facing B theory relates to the above, though Dike fails to deal with it. It is the seemingly one-way directionality of the arrow of time. The past is known to us from our memories, historical records, or can be inferred as we examine effects to deduce past causes. The present is taking place in the now, and so we directly experience it. But why then is the future unknown if all events in time and space are existent in the block universe? Why do we not remember the future the way we can remember the past? This is where the block universe image of the B theory fails. I offer a solution. Similar to how just because the events of the future are real does not mean that they determine my present choice, just because the events of the future are real does not mean they are knowable to me at this or any prior moment. For instance, I am able to look at my room and see what is taking place in it. I am, however, unable to see what is happening in the next room, but that does not mean that the next room and the events in it do not exist, or for that matter, that the events in a different city, country, or planet are not real just because I cannot see them. It is just that my visual ability is limited, while if I have X-ray vision, I will be able to see into the next room, or if I have telescopic vision, I will then be able to see the events of another city. My explanation does run into difficulty since it is not clear what kind of vision I will need to have to be able to see the future, unless we accept that some things indeed possess powers of clairvoyance. I initially wrote some people and then added animals, but then changed it to things, since perhaps plants, germs, crystal balls, or time machines may have such abilities. If the B theory is correct, time travel into the future is at least in principle possible, while if A theory is correct, it will not be, since the future does not exist in the now. The third difficulty affects both A and B theory. While A theory posits temporal passage is not directly experienced. It describes change and movement, but not temporal passage, making the A theory in fact static and not dynamic, despite its assertion to the contrary, while B theory is straightforwardly static. What does temporal passage mean? It is the qualia, or feeling that time is passing. One solution is to explain this qualia away. The subjective psychological feeling of temporal passage may simply be the perception of change, motion, or the succession of events. For instance, if we are in a place with very little motion or change, we may feel that time is passing slowly, while if things are fast-moving or changing rapidly, we may feel that time is passing quickly. As the saying goes, time flies when you're having fun. If this solution is acceptable, then both A and B theory can and do account for change, motion, and succession, since the time slices in both capture the image of the ripe red apple rotting over different time slices, even if it is discontinuous. As earlier noted, a good metaphysical theory describes what is real, but also should account for our subjective experience or common intuitions if they differ from what is real, since these are also part of what is real. We can do the latter by explaining how creatures like us, with our peculiar physical, psychological, and cognitive makeup, when embedded in a B-theoretic temporal reality, would model that reality in the way that we do. On our experience of temporal passage, when we watch a movie, what we are seeing is not continuous, but a series of pictures played back at 24 frames per second. We do not notice this choppiness because our cognitive apparatus interprets as smooth motion these static frames if they are changing sufficiently fast in front of our eyes. Hence, so long as the time slices in the block universe are more frequent than 24 frames per second, we will be unable to visually see the difference between continuous motion and stop motion. Dyke terms this as illusionism, where behind the illusion of continuous motion, which suggests temporal passage, is in fact a sequence of many static images played back quickly to our cognition. In addition, change, motion, and succession may be what we really mean when we talk about temporal passage, since when we talk about its qualia, we refer to change and motion, but have no description for temporal passage itself. Dyke refers to this as deflationism, where the qualia of temporal passage is deflated to just be the qualia of change. Dyke also applies these two strategies of illusionism and deflationism to explaining our experience of a privileged present. She first explains why we feel that the present is privileged. Subject to certain constraints, it is up to us which spatial location we occupy, but we seem to have no choice about which temporal location we occupy. Which moment is present seems to be something that the world imposes on us, so it is natural to think that it is an objective, rather than merely perspectival, feature of the world. A-theories support this feeling by arguing along realist lines, where things seem to us this way because they are in fact this way. Yet, do we directly experience presentness? An example is the observation of distant stars, where our experience of their older light does not differ from the observation of nearer and hence newer light. Both are experienced as present, with no way to tell by perception alone that one is from the distant past. Besides, there seems to be no difference between perceiving something and perceiving it as present. Every experience, when experienced, was in the present, and so there is no special characteristic that can be used to distinguish between experiences. If we did the exact same thing both yesterday and today, and wrote a detailed description of our experiences each time, the descriptions should be the same, with no salient difference for today's experience in the present, since when we were doing the activity yesterday, it was also present then. Thus, there seems to be no presentness that requires explanation, since presentness is not in fact a part of our experience. The privileging of the present may just be a function of our egocentricity and nothing further. We are embedded in time, so we encounter the world and represent it, always from the perspective of a particular time, explains Dyke. What is in question in the thinking about A and B theory is whether the future exists in reality and not just as an epistemological construct. In A theory, the future can be referred to but in a hypothetical way, while in B theory, it truly exists. Between both theories is an obvious alternative, presentism. Presentism posits that only the present truly exists, while both the past and the future are virtual or unreal. As Augustine writes, what about those two times, past and future? In what sense do they have real being if the past no longer exists and the future does not exist yet? As for present time, if that were always present and never slipped away into the past, it would not be time at all, it would be eternity. If therefore the present's only claim to be called time is that it is slipping away into the past, how can we assert that this thing is, when its only title to being is that it will soon cease to be? In other words, we cannot really say that time exists, except because it tends to non-being. How does presentism square with our common notions of time? That is, what Dike has presented as the folk theory of time. Presentism accords with the privileged present, since the present is not just privileged, it is the only thing that is real. As for temporal passage, all that is present is continually changing. So the dynamic nature of time consists in a change in what exists. However, to speak of change requires a comparison between the past and the present. Since the past does not actually exist, then presentism is also a static model with only one frame if reality was a movie, the present one. One way to manage what is past and future in presentism is to introduce substitute entities for what was in the past and will be in the future, such as abstract entities, which differ from the real entities of the present. Effectively, this is to consider B theory's block universe as a way to model, to visualize the past and the future, but not to mistake that reality actually exists that way. Presentism is in the literature considered a variant of A theory, though I think it should be a theory in its own right, since it is different in one crucial way, which is the non-existence of the past. Perhaps this is because the difficulties and arguments against A theory often apply also to presentism, such as the absence of simultaneity, and hence a universal now, according to special theory of relativity. I will like to conclude not by recapping the various positions, but to discuss an as yet unmentioned difficulty which is not considered by Dike also. A theory posits the existence of the past and present, while B theory posits the existence of the past, present, and future. Presentists will question what is meant by existence in relation to the past and the future. The past has happened, but that is literally history, no longer real today. Napoleon Bonaparte really existed in the 17th and 18th century, but not anymore. So what does it mean to speak of his existence in the present except as something virtual? That virtual existence may be higher rank than the existence of something that never existed, such as a unicorn, though, since the future is unknown, maybe one can come into existence. There is nothing logically that prevents a unicorn from being born, say through genetic engineering. Then there are entities which can never exist, such as a square circle or a false truth, simply because they defy logic. No matter how our technology advances or nature changes, those entities can never come into existence even in principle. If we do not adopt an absolutist take on truth, where something is either true or false even if we do not know which, these entities can be ranked according to their degrees of reality. What is really existent presently, such as my body, ranks above what currently does not exist but had existed, such as Napoleon, which ranks above what currently does not exist but will in future, such as my body tomorrow if all goes well, which ranks above what currently does not exist but may in future, such as unicorns or my great-grandchildren, which ranks above what can never exist, such as a square circle. If we are absolutists on truth, the veracity of all except what exists in the present is in doubt. If we are presentists, my body exists but not entities like Napoleon, not to mention the rest. If we are A-theorists, my body and Napoleon exist but not the rest. If we are B-theorists, my body, Napoleon, and unicorns potentially exist. In none of the theories can square circles exist. We are now venturing to metaphysical territory that relates to time, though not directly. It asks about the ontological status of the fictional, the yet to exist, the imaginary that may exist, the impossible to exist but yet exist in our thoughts, and the previously existent. Do they exist? The A, B, and presentist theories of time have differing presuppositions on the reality of these categories. The existence of all these categories themselves are contested, even the existence of the present physical entities. For instance, in the debate between materialists who believe the physical world exists, in contrast with idealists who think that only the mind exists, with the physical world only a figment of the mind's imagination. Idealism will trouble all three theories of time. Putting idealism aside, presentists have the least ontological commitments, since they are committed only to the presently existent, which we can directly and empirically verify. A theorists are next, committed to the present and past entities, which can only be indirectly attested to, be it through mental recall, like I remember going to school decades ago, testimonies, like she told me about her trip, which took place a week ago, or records such as fossil and birth or death records. While B theorists have the most ontological commitments, since they are committed in addition to the future entities, which cannot be verified at all. Dyke sides with B theorists since she thinks it is compatible with scientific theories, while A theory meets our folk notions, and presentism has minimal presuppositions about what exists. Thank you for listening to the Philosophical Bachelor.